So introduce yourself and a little of your background, and we'll go into.
Okay. I spoke to you the other day. I'm in Baltimore. I'm Arthur Ferguson, and you suggested we have a Zoom call. I'm just a customer who's been in love with musical theater my whole life, actually since age 6, when my mother took me to see Mary Martin and Peter Pan. And I was lucky enough to live in suburban New York, so I would frequently go in and go to musicals, good ones, bad ones. I saw A Joyful Noise twice out of 12 performances.
Did you go back because you knew it was closing?
No, I went back because I liked it. I mean, I love Karen Morrow. It was the second time I saw John Raitt. I saw him in the revival of Carousel at the Lincoln Center. Richard Rodgers, Lincoln Center musical.
Right. He did a lot of his shows during the 60s, mid-60s, right?
Yes. So I saw him there at Lincoln Center. And then I went and I also saw the opening, it should have been the closing, of The Fig Leaves Are Falling.
So you were very disappointed in that?
Oh, it was awful. It was terrible.
Dorothy Loudon was, poor Dorothy Loudon. She was always good in shows that closed quickly.
Yes. She had...
until Annie, I mean, she had a very checkered career. It was certainly never her fault.
No. And she had the only decent song in 50% in Ballroom. And you had to stay, I didn't see her in it, but you had to stay in, because it was the 11 o'clock number, you had to stay the whole show to have the one good song. She was, but I remembered it wasn't Jill, it was her sister,
Jenny, I think Jenny.
Yes, Jenny. The sister of the lead in Promises, Promises,
right,
was in Fig Leaves, and it was directed by George Abbott, and it was awful.
At that point, he couldn't really hear well?
Yeah, that's right. He lasted until 102.
But I went to see, he was involved in Richard Adler Music Is. And I went down to Washington. Richard Adler invited me to see the show and think about recording it.
Oh, wow.
So they're rehearsing, and George Abbott is sleeping. And Pat Birch is there actively directing the people.
Okay. I wish someone could persuade. This is what I would love. I saw the City Center version of Where's Charlie? I don't know if you saw it.
Yes.
The City Center Encore revival of Where's Charlie. And it was the first time I'd ever heard the dance music, the extended dance music, and it was fabulous. I was in tears with the beauty of having a stage with that dance music and people dancing. And he couldn't get it, or he hasn't gotten it recorded yet or released.
Well, there's the London cast recording, and I found out recently in a book by his first daughter, Susan Lesser,
yes,
that he did not want that recorded. He tried to stop them from he couldn't stop the production because he didn't own the production, but he said, no, I want the cast that I had in New York to record it. This is 10 years later, the show. The problem originally was that there was a musician strike. So they couldn't record it for like 9 months or so, a good long time. But the show ran for a couple of years. So when I interview Emily or maybe Susan Lesser, I said, well, why didn't he record the show once the band was off? Ray Bolger was still there, and all the other people. The chorus people doesn't make that much difference which of two chorus people have gone on to other things. It can be recorded, so there's no answer. And and the movie, he purportedly did not like the movie because they made changes he didn't approve of. Didn't record all the songs. Well, that's typical for Hollywood. I mean, well.
Yeah, I mean, there are about 4 or 5 songs that are spectacular, including Once in Love with Amy and
Make a Miracle.
Make a Miracle. I love Make a Miracle. That was Sondheim's list of 50 songs that he wished he'd written. And I love those songs that are sort of off center a bit and express love that way. It's a very peculiar genre. And Joe Lesser spoke about how at the talkback after City Center, spoke about how he was Frank Lesser, and I think you and I have discussed this, helped Adler and with Pajama Game and
Ross, because he became a publisher, and he encouraged people, and he actually hired people. He put them on salary and sort of waited for things. I'm a fan of the big flop called East of Eden. What's the East of Eden? Here's Where I Belong.
I don't know that show.
And it was Steinbeck, and he was, according to this book, he was good friends with Steinbeck. So I'm sure there was some talk at some point. He said, I love East of Eden, of course, a very successful movie.
Yes.
But for some reason, maybe he was busy doing something else. So he said, well, I got some up-and-coming writers, Robert Waldman and Alfred Urey. So they did it, and they got Mitch Miller involved. And he took an ad in the New York Times. I love the full-page ad, and said, I produced. I was at Columbia, and he didn't really he was the A&R man at Columbia Records. He said, I was there when we did My Fair Lady and all these other shows, and this is the greatest musical ever. And I'm putting my reputation behind this. And they got Terrence McNally to write the book. Eventually they fired him, and they took his name off. So
was it ever recorded?
No. Again, he had a deal with United Artists. And at that point, Mitch had moved from Columbia to United Artists. So had the show had a reasonable run, it would have been on United Artists. Again, the closed opening night, United Artists said, are you kidding? We're not going to record it. There's still the closed opening night. And,
Well, thank God that Goddard Lieberson recorded Anyone Can Whistle after the close.
Right.
Which I saw on the last night of its Broadway run. 9th performance, Saturday night.
Did you know that was closing? Because again, I did not know, because I thought the deal was, when I came to New York, I thought the New York Times will tell me if I need to make sure, because I wanted to get the cast album to shows if I could. And they did. In those days, they recorded shows on a Sunday, and on Thursday, there was a cast album. Thursday. But there was no mention, and again, what I learned is New York Times will only pass along information if they're told by like Thursday or Friday. Otherwise, they're going to tell you afterwards. It closed, not it's going to close. That's a whole different kettle of fish. It's going to close. Go and see it versus you missed it, Bruce. So I said, you've got to do it one more time. Now, since then, I've seen it like 4 or 5 times. So for a show that closed so quickly, I've seen it many times because I would like to have seen the original with Angela Lansbury and Lee Remick.
Oh, Lee Remick was wonderful. I sat in the first row, pretty much center, although a little bit to house right. So when Hapgood sits on the lip of the stage and says, "You were all mad," he was about 12 feet away from me. So it was wonderful, just wonderful. Lee Remick, marvelous. I saw her in Wait Until Dark.
Yes, that was very effective. Yeah.
And in Anyone Can Whistle, she delivered the title song beautifully.
And
I don't think there was anyone better.
Because Jerry Herman saw Anyone Can Whistle, he suggested for Mame Angela Lansbury. There were other people who talked about. And the producers said, well, we didn't see it. It got bad reviews. And, so when the other people that were supposedly interested in doing it somehow didn't work out, he said, well, okay, now let's go back to my choice, Angela. And that child started her really successful singing career.
She was very good, but I have to say that the actor playing Hapgood,
Harry Gardino? Is that
Harry Gardino? He was terrific. And you needed that sort of insouciance, that Frank Sinatra kind of attitude. And he had it. And when the City Center did it with the fellow who was also in the revival of Company, City Center Encores did it. He was terrible, the male lead, because he was so reserved.
Right.
I can't remember his name, but he was the lead in the revival of Company where everybody played their own instruments.
Right.
They did that.
Raul Esparza.
Yes, Raul Esparza. He was great in Company, terrible in the Encores, Anyone Can Whistle. They did that with playing the instruments in London. The first time that I knew they did that was in Destry Rides Again. The London cast album of Destry Rides Again, they played their own instruments.
Uh-huh.
Have you heard that cast album?
On John, the one with Alfred Molina.
Yes, Alfred Molina.
It pales in comparison to Andy Griffith, and so not a good version.
No, but now I saw the original. I was 13, and my father.
You're close enough for the whip dance?
Yes, yes, and that used to be on YouTube. You could see it. Now you can't find it anywhere.
Well, YouTube will let you put up things. We hope to put these videos on YouTube. So, and I don't think anyone's going to complain about us talking about Broadway theater. But evidently somebody connected with the production did not want it on YouTube. So YouTube will take it down and say, well, okay, if you want to, you're involved. You can't, I don't like that show as you can just say, I'm a rights holder. And
they'll take it. I would love to see that reposted. I remember that. I remember I was sitting sort of 2/3 of the way back, and my father took me with some friends. It was my birthday party, and everybody in the cast, everybody in the audience, or the kids, got deputy sheriff's badges at the show. They handed them out.
On the way in, they gave you a badge?
Yep. So I had a deputy sheriff's badge. I don't know where it is now.
Did you go to the stage door? Did you sometimes go to the stage door afterwards?
Only once. And that was to get Lee Remick's autograph after Anyone Can Whistle. And I don't have the program anymore, but I was there. And at the end of the cookie chase, the big dance in the third act, you know, where it's run for your lives, run for your lives, the dam has burst. She ends up with the tap dancing young men, and she's in their arms, and she's horizontal. And the audience cheered and applauded and would not let the show continue. It was fabulous. And then at the end, where they had a real fake rock, you know, the one that
the water is supposed to come out of
the water's supposed to come out, the one left over from the Peer Gynt Festival, as it said, and they kiss. That's good enough for me. And they kiss, and the water, as a real miracle, explodes from the rock. Was wonderful. That was a remarkable experience in the theater for me. I remember it. But the best was when I saw Company in previews. And Dean Jones was excellent. And I remember I was sitting in the first row, way on house left. And in the turn, in Being Alive, he opens his eyes as he opens his heart. And it comes somebody who, to somebody loved me too much. You know, when that turn happened, he opened his eyes. Just spectacular. That little act in the theater, in that song, made that song work. And I wanted to stand, but I was too shy then when she said, "Everybody rise." And I read later that that's what Sondheim wanted. He wanted people to stand, but they didn't. As opposed to what happened with Ray Bolger in Once in Love with Amy, where he got everybody to sing. And everybody claims that they were the ones that started that. But I wish I had.
Well, in the Lesser book by Susan Lesser, she said that initially, Frank Lesser was sure that this was a showstopper. And it got good response. And Ray Bolger came up with the idea. He said, I'm going to sort of feature this song and invite the audience to join in. And once they did that, that made it the showstopper that everybody wanted it to be.
Okay. Now,
are you also aware why Larry Kurt took over for Dean Jones so quickly?
He was in a divorce. Dean Jones was in a divorce. And
singing this about, the bitterness of, the relationship. He couldn't go through that every night. It's like you're reminding me of what I'm personally going through. And so
he, I saw Larry Kurt later. I was in the balcony and I saw him, and he was not as good as Dean Jones because
Did you see West Side Story? Did you see him in West Side Story?
I did not. The problem with Larry Kurt, it's the other problem that Raul Esparza had. Raul Esparza couldn't be Hapgood because he couldn't emote. He couldn't, he's the opposite of a Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin character. He didn't have that male way of going about him. Larry Kurt couldn't not emote. He was all over the place.
Right.
And Bobby is somebody who is, when the women describe him, the woman describes him, there are these kind of people and there's this kind of people. Bobby is this. And unless he's that until Being Alive, when he opens, doesn't work. And Larry Kurt was this way all through. So it didn't work. And that matters to me.
How many times did you see Company? The original.
The original twice, once with Dean Jones and once with Larry Kurt. My real regret is never having seen David Carroll on stage after Dartmouth. I was at Dartmouth with David Carroll. Couldn't act at all.
But he was in musicals at Dartmouth?
Yes. And we overlapped, I think, for just 1 year. Extraordinarily handsome.
Do you recall what show he did at Dartmouth?
No, could have been Oliver. Couldn't act at all. Very stiff. Extraordinarily handsome. And could sing well, although I don't remember him singing at the level that he later achieved. And I have every album that I can find of his, including Shadowlands Music, early Kern. The Shadowlands Music that he has one cut on. But I even have Mark Twain, the musical. And when he sings, that's sort of the opening song after it's part of the introduction, A Life on the Mississippi. That's a soaring ballad. I cry. Beautiful voice. Amazing. If I had to have only two people to listen to, it would be Nancy Lamott and David Carroll.
You saw Old Brother that I made a record of with David James Carroll?
You made one? Oh, yeah. Oh boy.
I have Brother. Oh Brother. Oh Brother.
Oh Brother. I have Oh Brother.
The song I to the World, that song makes me cry, just the way he sings that song.
Okay. The problem with that is I can't tell from the listings which are his songs.
You must recognize his voice. It's a very distinctive voice.
I do, but it's hard. So it's I to the World?
Right.
Okay.
He's with
I'll
his
go
twin.
Back to it.
He's with the twin. He sings,
He's wonderful. And, I mean, he sang with Judy Kay in at least one or two of them, and Judy Kuhn, who are still with us.
Right.
Judy Kuhn's album.
Quite a few pop albums she's done.
Yeah, Time After Time is
all Julie Stein, isn't it?
Yes, and that's the one where she does the bossa nova beat or the Caribbean beat to "You'll Never Get Away from Me." Mm-hmm. You remember that?
Not specifically, but
okay. Anyway, these are all, and I was brought up in a very secular household. I was bar mitzvah, okay, but my father was very religious and he hated it, or brought up very religious, hated it. So my connection to Judaism is through the Great American Songbook. Everybody but Cole Porter on the A list was Jewish, and the B+ list, almost all of them were Jewish. So, and Mark Stein, who isn't Jewish, his grandfather was, has written about how the melodies, the strong single voice, powerful melodies of the Great American Songbook are cantorial. They have direct relationship in their style to Jewish liturgical music. So
Harold Arlen, I believe his father was a rabbi, wasn't he?
Which one?
Harold Arlen, his father was a rabbi?
Yes. Irving Berlin's father was, I think, a cantor. or rabbi. Now, I have to count Oscar Hammerstein II, even though he was brought up as an Episcopalian. He has Jewish heritage. So, and I have loved this stuff, and I get very emotional in musicals, even when they're bad musicals. And I have my favorites.
What's the most recent musical that moved you?
I would have to say the greatest production of Carousel was at Stratford, Ontario, about 4 years ago. And it had me in tears from the beginning, because very audaciously, in the opening scene, when Billy gives Julie a souvenir from he gives her something to keep. The choice to give her from the carousel was, from one of the horses, a star. And I said, how the hell are they going to do that at the end? I mean, so you have to make a decision that at that point I knew that she would see him, that she would know. There would be no ambiguity. And every other production of Carousel I've seen, and I had thought that it was essential that there be ambiguity as to whether she sees him. But this destroyed that ambiguity. How can she make it work? It was a professor, a woman, directed it. Okay.
These were pretty much unknown actors. These were not Broadway people.
No, but it was one of the greatest experiences. It matched company because of its complete reinvention, and he made it Julie's victory. In the bench scene, I knew from an interview that Richard Rodgers did in the musical theater revival, Lincoln Center revival, way back in the 60s, 66, 67, that the progression of If I Loved You was very important as it appears in the song. Sing it 3 times, I think. First time and the second time, there's no space between if and I. So it's if I loved you, and then it's if I loved you. And that was supposed to be directed that way. So that follows the course of the song, where they fall in love over 16 minutes or 12 minutes. And they fall in love during If I Loved You, from it being contingent to being real. In Stratford, and if you listen to the various versions, except for one done, I think, by Kiri Takanoa, they follow that. But it was in the Stratford version. It goes, if I loved you, and then the second one, I think it's the second one, it's if I loved you. And each one caught themselves, realized what they were saying, and then reverted to if I loved you in the third. It was amazing. It was that attention to one of the key details of the song, and doing it so that they fell in love but were embarrassed and then came back, and each one did it, that turned it into something special. And at the end, she sees him. She does see him. and he knows it. And in the last scene, when it's not, he's not in back of her saying, "I loved you, Julie, know that I loved you." He's, it's only a 2-minute song in or less. He's on stage left, she's on stage right, and he says, "I loved you, Julie. Know that I love you." And she nods in forgiveness to him. And she says it's okay. And it's really her victory. It's Julie's victory. And she says in the bench scene, if I love someone, I'd die for him. She doesn't give up. He's been dead for 16 years. And she has not surrendered her will and her insistence on her one love. And she wins at the end when he says, "I loved you, Julie, know that I loved you." That made it big. And at that time, my tears were flowing. I was, what is it, verklempt? It was the single greatest reinvention of a musical I have ever seen on any stage, anywhere. And it was the only time that I have seen Carousel done where the turn in soliloquy from boy to girl was handled well. It's almost impossible. When he says, wait, what am I thinking about? It could be very difficult. And it is those turns, it's that switch that marks not only the most difficult part of that song, but of many songs. And you have to be extraordinary to do it. And this guy did it better than John Reid, because I saw John Reid in the revival. He and each of the songs, except for "You'll Never Walk Alone," the first time, was acted straight through. It was a remarkable, and my wife, who was there with me, knew, she sort of knew to musical theater since she married me. She'd seen some, but she knew how extraordinary this was from the very beginning. Anyway, that woman who directed the Stratford, Ontario Carousel should direct anything and everything. And she made it. She didn't hide the slapping or the difficult line about how, sometimes when someone hits you and you don't feel it, if they love you, or that line that turns people into pretzels was delivered straight, but nothing would stop Julie from getting what she wanted, which was the love of the man she loved. It was amazing. I've gone on too long.
How many years ago did you see that there?
Probably 4.
Oh, recently. So
yeah.
She's ready and willing to come to New York and revive Anyone Can Whistle or whatever show you want to see, right?
Oh, if she directs it, I'll go see it. And I would love, if you talk to Joe Lesser, or if you post this and she's listening, please authorize and encourage people to contribute to the release of the Encores album of Where's Charlie?
Well, she had the opportunity. Those things, it's the rights holders that pay for them. They do. Gentleman Before Blonde, Sister Joe Stein, and his wife's, paying for it. And Punch a Wagon, it's the estate of Frederick Lowe that pays for them. So.
Oh, that owns the Frank Lesser work?
Right. So, early on, DRG was given the opportunity to record the shows at a very low rate. And then I'm afraid, I'm guessing, musicians said, well, they're recording all these shows. They must be doing well. And there's a limited market for these things, a limited market. Hamilton, there's no limit to Hamilton. You know, you can make Hamilton CDs till the cows come home. But Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, there are 1,000 or 2 people at most. So, you know, and then when they were forced to pay as if this is a hit Broadway show,
Yep.
that kills it unless the rights holders say, well, we have the money or we'd like to do a more modern recording. You know, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes had been recorded in the 40s, and there was a revival that was very bad with Katie Sullivan. Wasn't her fault, but you know, certainly did not belong on Broadway, the Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Yes.
And so finally, when they did it with Megan Hilty, they have the definitive recording, and I'm sure they recorded some of the dance music for people like you, and overtures. If there originally wasn't an overture, they would give you the overture, you know, to some of the things. And yeah.
Well, I am still waiting, and I'm glad that I'm alive from 1964 to now. I'm still waiting for J Records to issue their full recording of Anyone Can Whistle, which has been promised.
He's on the verge. On Facebook, he keeps talking about it. There was a contest for design of the cover. They have the cover, and you know, but I think he's waiting for a time that things are opening up again, and maybe there are record stores and things like that. I don't know if there are any Barnes and Nobles or places like that are open. I'm not sure. That there might be 1 or 2, but certainly not around the country. And you know, if we can come to a time when things are opening up again, then I think he'll put it out.
Well, boy, I hope so. I heard his full version of the Cookie Chase. You know, where they go after and get the cookies, and that goes on for what, 15, 20 minutes, and it was very good.
Right.
And I would love to see it. I mean, it's been since 1964. And it's fabulous. I will say that I still am open. I hope I always will be to when people do the impossible beautifully, take on extraordinarily difficult tasks. And the most recent example for me was the studio recording. No, I guess it was, I guess it wasn't studio recording, or it was the most recent Brigadoon.
Based on the encore. That was an encore thing again.
Yes, encore. And the actress, that's kind of a funny name.
Kelly O'Hara. Yeah.
Not her. But the one who played
Susan Johnson original.
Who played the Susan Johnson role. And I invite you to listen to her singing The Love of My Life, which is, you know, essentially one joke repeated 3 times.
All the men that come, every one is the love of her life.
Right.
And then comes another guy, and he's the love of my life. And
right.
Very
it's
clever.
A comic song. And I love Susan Johnson.
In My Mother's Wedding Day, again.
Yes.
These are not on the original cast because they were too racy.
That's right.
40s, yeah.
Yeah. So the last line is cut from the RCA original cast album. My Mother's Wedding Day is on it, but the last line is changed. And I should know because I was there on my mother's wedding day, was changed. And they cut The Love of My Life.
Right.
but the actress who sings "Love of My Life" on the Kelly O'Hara recording of Brigadoon, she makes it into a performance. It's a song. She is using accents, guttural voice, sing back and forth. It's extraordinary. It was fabulous. The first time I heard it, that's worth the price of the song itself. Now, I saw I think it's the famous City Center revival of Brigadoon way back in the 60s, where they had the very athletic dancer, male American dancer, still alive, Edward Villela, about whom it was written that he could, during his leaps, he could change direction in the middle of his leaps, and his performance was electrifying. It truly was. So this is stuff I remember. And what I loved about Brigadoon was, and Love of My Life, it was craft. It was this extraordinary attention to craft and detail in the service of art. It made that song come alive. And with her, I would put her in any cast anywhere because she does the work and achieves the result. She has extraordinary talent. And Susan Johnson blasts through it just for the comedy, but and of course she's the great belter. But this woman, not KT or something like that, she was extraordinary. And whenever I go back to that album, I go to that song, and it gives me hope in the quality of performers today.
What did you think about the Mac and Mabel revival? Because I thought that girl who played the Bernadette Peters part really made it her own and was as good or maybe even a little better than Bernadette had been.
I didn't see it. I like the music. It's his great flop as Pal Joey. Everybody says it's got to work, and it doesn't. So you get Mac and Mabel, it doesn't work. It's good for cabaret. You get Pal Joey. I've heard at least 4 people say we're going to do Pal Joey, and it's going to work this time. And it never does, or they don't do it. It's like doing a Chekhov, where I've heard so many dramaturgs and directors say, the reason that Chekhov doesn't work is because the Russians knew how to do comedy, and we know how to do comedy. And it still doesn't work. But, so, the other flop musical that I saw that certainly had its moments was Maggie Flynn. And boy, do I remember when Jack Cassidy came out, stage left, and sang, Why Can't I Walk Away? It was spectacular. If there had been scenery on stage, and he just did it in front of the curtain, if there had been scenery on stage, he would have chewed it up. But I saw him in that. I saw him in She Loves Me. He was great. Nasty Man, yes.
Ultimately, the relationship between his wife, Shirley Jones, and him in the show was somehow that you would like to have had them basically get along or have kind of a happy ending, and that didn't happen.
Right. And it was a flop, but that song made such a difference. That song was worth going to see it. And I loved High Spirits, which I saw. I remember during the overture, which was a very brassy overture, that overture and the overture for Bajur are the brassiest overtures I know. And I love that. You don't get that anymore. Even then, you didn't get it frequently. And during the overture, they had what is it when you have the cutout for a light? What's that called again? There's a term when you make cutouts for lights. Anyway, what they had was they had clouds going across the front curtain during the whole overture. And the cast was terrific. My favorite song was Edward Woodward. Remember him?
Sure.
If I Gave You. I sang that all through high school to anyone who would listen and people who wouldn't listen to. And I even like Bonjour, which now is not very PC. Where is the Tribe for Me could not be sung on any stage. You could do it privately.
The gypsies are definitely thieves. They're proud of it. You can't.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Every gypsy is being a crook.
Right, but it had that. The ending song that Nancy Dessau sings, Seizing Love. You know that song, la da da da, la da 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 dum. Why can't I? How it feels. Why run away from mayhem that may come? She was wonderful, and she's still with us. I have to say that when she issued her album way back on Varese Sarabande, I think it was, the most touching song that I found on that was when she sang Make Someone Happy, because I saw Do Re Mi when it was sung to her, and that was a nice connection over time. Am I going on too much?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
What flop did you hate?
What flop did I hate? Well, Fig Leaves Are Falling was completely awful from beginning to end. I wish I had seen Fields of Ambrosia just because it was so over the top. I obtained the DVD of the movie starring Stacy Keach that is from the same source material. No, I got to see it, but I would have loved to have seen a movie which is based on a traveling executioner in the South in the 1920s.
So they did Fields of Ambrosia twice in New York that I'm aware of. They did it. There was a reading of new musicals.
Yes.
On 42nd Street on this is in the 70s, I'm thinking. And they did a reading of it, with just a piano or something like that, and Christine Andreas was there,
Yep.
She was married to the composer of the score. And then they did it, I think, at the George Street Theater or one of the small regional theaters in New Jersey. I went to see it there. Mm-hmm. And there were some good things, Yep. And then they did it in the West End. And the British people feel that's the worst musical we've ever given them. And they did make it because, if she's sentenced to be, hung by the executioner, and she said, take pity on me and all that.
Yes.
And so he does. And then after, she tries to kill him.
Yep.
in a musical comedy that's very ungracious. And Christine Andreas is such a sweet soul that never in a million years would she. But that's the book they were given.
Yeah, Paper Mill did it, and it was a success in New Jersey. Maybe that appeals to New Jersey sensibilities.
I don't think it was Paper Mill. I think it was this George Street Theater.
Okay.
It was one of a season, 4 weeks or something like that.
Mm-hmm. The Follies revival, starring Bernadette Peters. I saw at the Kennedy Center before they moved it to New York, and it was terrible. And Bernadette Peters was terrible. I saw the original Follies, and she was selling her song in the at the end of the show. Sun comes up, I think about you. She was selling it. You don't sell it. You're constrained. You're not moving left, not moving right means you don't move. Oh, it was terrible. I really despised it. Apparently she got better, and she was told, don't lift your arms to the sky when you're singing that. There was that problem also in the Follies in London, which I saw. 2 out of 4.
Did you see Diana Rigg?
Did I see? No, I saw the most recent National Theater revival. I have the London recording with Daniel Massey.
Diana Rigg sang the song that was written for that show, but underneath. There's actually a video of that on YouTube, so if people want to see.
I should. Now
what
that
she looked like. It's amazing. I would advise anybody who is looking for things on YouTube, just put in names of people or shows, and you'll be amazed how many things there are.
Yes. And now that we've lost her, you can always, I don't know, have you seen Theater of Blood, the movie?
Yeah, not a big fan of that.
Well, I think it's a hoot, particularly the Robert Morley death at the end, based on Titus Andronicus and his 2 poodles. And
so I was wondering if the only thing she originated as a hopefully Broadway show was Colette. It was written by Smith and Jones.
Oh, okay.
And it started in Seattle. It's not a particularly good tryout town, I believe.
No.
And it was criticized in the book. There's actually on YouTube. Somebody is reviewing it and said that this may seem like a good idea, but it's not. And she's interviewed, and she says, "I hope someday that the show will be a success, and many people in the future will recreate my role." Of course, the show went to Denver and closed in Denver, and eventually the show itself was done in New York under Colette Collage, completely redone and not made into the same kind of show that it had been.
And David Carroll is on that. The album. Yep, it was Colette Collage, and that was also the one with the Karen Morrow Long, the baby.
Grassharp.
Yes, Grassharp. I think they were issued together. She's remarkable. I love.
Did you see the Grassharp?
I did not. Did you?
Yes. I saw everything. From Breakfast at Tiffany's on, I saw everything for 52 years.
That's a remarkable record.
Yes. If anyone could beat me, I would like to hear from them.
Well, I don't think anyone will.
Al Hirschfeld purportedly went to every opening. And after he died, there was a retrospective of his art,
Yes.
and the guy, took questions from the audience. I said, well, did he see every show? Because, he went to shows for like, I don't know, 70 years or something like that. He said, well, he didn't see every show. I said, that's all I need to know. He missed a couple. So my 52 years is, see, I need to see the Book of Mormon. Otherwise, it's 42 years.
Well, so did you see A Man with a Load of Mischief?
Oh, yes. Because I was off Broadway. And,
Yep.
I wound up recording, the original was on Cap Records. And so that's for sale at Footlight Records. And then they revived it at the York Theater. And the composer called me and he said, what about recording? At that point, there was no CD. And there still is no legitimate CD, although there is one at Footlight anyway. So he said, I have a recording studio. So it'll cost virtually nothing. So I said, well, there's a singer I'd like to replace and add one of my favorite singers, Brooke Morober. He said that would be fine. He said, I have a singer that I want to replace another person. So we each got our favorite replacement people, and we did it in his apartment, and it's nice. Maybe the original has more instruments, and the average person would probably enjoy the original more, but
And I saw it on a day when, on an evening, it was during the newspaper strike. And the innkeeper, the actor playing the innkeeper, was ill. So the playwright,
Barry Travers? Ben Travers?
No, not the playwright. I guess it was the man who wrote the music and lyrics.
No, that's the guy that I work with.
Right. He was on book and did the role.
Uh-huh.
But what I treasure from that experience is Virginia Vestoff. Just a gorgeous voice in that in 1776. Just wonderful.
One of my very first recording was The Landed Bridegroom. And I could not use any member of the cast without paying everybody a week's salary. And this is to be a little EP with 4 songs. So eventually we wound up with Virginia Vestoff singing on it, and she was lovely.
No, she was
also. Did you see her in Via Galactica, the closed opening night?
No. You did?
It opened the Circle in the Square. What's the Eurus, now the Gershwin.
I hope that the theaters will survive.
They're now saying that it might be another year. From the point that everybody is vaccinated, it still is going to be another year before everybody is sure and all of that. So we're talking at the end of 2021, so which is a long time. But I think there will be some theater places in a reduced capacity. There won't be necessarily Broadway shows with 1,500 people sitting next to each other. Yes.
Well, I heard a prediction that regular for theater, regular theater, or non-musical theater, that we've gone from in the glory days, in the golden age of American theater, you'd have 20 or 30 people in the cast, to in the most recent times, from in the 60s, 70s, 8 to 10 in a cast, to 3 to 6. And then when they come back, it'll go to monologues. One actor. And I won't go. I've only seen one monologue that was worth seeing. That was Alec McGowan. You remember when he did The Gospel According to St. Mark as a monologue?
I didn't see it, but I remember.
That was worth it. A tour de force. I saw it in Baltimore. He did it in sort of casual clothes. He did one of the high sweaters and a jacket and a table and a couple of chairs. That's it. And he came on and he said, this is the book. I'm going to put it here on the end of the table just in case I need help. And he never had to go back to it. But that, to my mind, a monologue is not theater. I won't go to it. I just won't. I'll miss it. But in the meantime, I'll watch Turner Classic Movies and listen to these wonderful albums that you put out and other people have put out.
Okay, I think we've had a wonderful talk about the theater, and we may revisit this at some point, but anxious to put things up there. And thank you very much for joining me and talking about the shows you love.
Oh, well, thank you. Where would I find it on YouTube?
Well, I need people to help me put it on YouTube. I don't think this is a difficult thing, but, just type it in. The series is called, as my radio show was called, Ain't Broadway Grand.
Okay.
So if you just type in Ain't Broadway Grand or Bruce Yacko, and sufficient a few weeks have passed, hopefully you will see yourselves.
And frighten people. But I'll tell you, musical theater is gorgeous. And thank you for your role in keeping it alive for, the altar cockers of the world, and I hope for the younger people in the world too.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you, Bruce.
End this. Let's see. Click on to end it. I need to just save it once admitting for all.